Hi everyone, welcome back to the DDLC seminar series organized by the IDS Lab at Cornell University. This is your host Nishant, and today's talk is going to be about universal learning in nonlinear dynamics and neural architectures. And it's a pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Professor Elad Hazan from Princeton University. Uh, a short bio on Professor Hazan. He's with the Computer Science Department and at Princeton University, and his research focus is on analysis of algorithms for machine learning and optimization. And among his core contributions, one of the most famous algorithms, adaptive gradient algorithm for deep learning, and uh, he's also contributed to the first sublinear time algorithms for convex optimization, and also in the online non-stochastic control theory. He's a recipient of a number of awards, the Bell Lab Prize, IBM Goldberg Best Paper Award, that was twice, a European Research Council grant, a Marie Curie Fellowship, a Google Research Award, and he's also an ACM Fellow. And Dr. Hazan has served on the steering committee of Association of Computational Learning and was the program chair of COLT uh, conference. And he's also the co-founder and the director of Google AI Princeton. And without further ado, I'll let Professor Hazan take on the talk. Thanks.
Hello, folks. You can hear me? Is this okay? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. And slides are visible?
Yes. Yes, we can see the slides.
All right. Is this recorded, by the way?
Yes, it's recorded and it's being streamed online. So
Okay.
yeah, you can view it later.
All right. Well, I prefer that there is a way to do Q&A. I don't know if we can do it online, but if there are
So
questions online,
yeah,
please let me
if there are
know.
questions, I'll just relay them.
Okay, very good. So I'll talk about learning, universal learning in nonlinear dynamical systems and neural architecture. My name is Elad Hazan. Thanks for the introduction. And I'm from Princeton and Google DeepMind. This is work with my folks from my lab, both at Princeton students, undergrads, grads, and a few research staff members at Google DeepMind. And the theme of the talk is, why does next word prediction give rise to intelligent behavior? That's a fascinating question that we have encountered, all of us have encountered recently. I don't have a great answer, but this is something that we all have experienced. So you have an input time series and an output time series. These are usually tokens to an LLM. For example, this is a talk I gave a week ago. Swiss clock conference is held in, and then the output word is Engelberg. So that's a conference I attended last week. And we train our models, the LLMs, to predict the next word and do so very accurately. And somehow, then when we apply them autoregressively, meaning that the input time series is the same as the output time series, just with the difference of one time iteration, then we get very seemingly intelligent answers and behavior. And this is something that was already predicted by Claude Shannon, who was the father of information theory, who basically said if we minimize entropy or perplexity in its modern name, then we minimize uncertainty in the data sequence. This will give rise to intelligent behavior. He predicted that, and the reason is that in order to really minimize and compress your data very well, you need to have a great understanding of the physical world and be able to represent phenomena such as gravitational force and so on. And this was, I guess, a prediction ahead of its time. In the 80s and 90s, people looked at various models for predicting perplexity, and they're based on n-gram models and statistical learning. That took us only so far. It didn't take us very well. There are famous quotes at that time that linguistic data is not very useful and we should focus on statistical perplexity minimization. And of course, this really exploded in the 2010s when we have deep learning revolution, and more recently and after that RNNs, and most recently transformers, ChatGPT, and so on. Now, a word on transformers, which I would like to model in the language of dynamical systems. So they learn dynamical system in a universal way. These are basically deep neural networks that are able to take a sequence of tokens and predict the next token very accurately. The main mechanism behind them is called attention, and it has an issue, computational issue. So this is by now famous that if you have L tokens, the attention map, is my cursor here visible when I move the cursor? Is this something you can see?
Yep,
Yeah.
I can see your cursor.
Oh, great. Okay, good. So computing the attention of a word with all other words, if you have a context length of L, takes times L inner products. And if you have L self-attention, all words with themselves, that's L squared. So this is quadratic complexity. It doesn't scale very well. And it motivates the search for better architectures that are more efficient. This takes us back to recurrent neural networks that were studied for a long time, LSTMs and so forth, more recently. And that's why I'm talking to you today. People from Stanford and other places have looked at RNNs again using the language of dynamical systems and rebranded it as state space models. And they have basically made able to solve some of the optimization issues with RNNs. And it also solves some of the issues with transformers, namely the computational bottlenecks. So RNNs are very efficient. They have a state, and you can predict the next token in constant time that depends only on the RNN size rather than the number of tokens. So these are very promising. They still don't perform as well as transformers in terms of long context and accuracy, but they do bring us into the domain of dynamical systems, and that's the subject of my talk. And the motivation question for my talk is, can we design an efficient provable learner in high-dimensional dynamical systems that also work for long contexts and are efficient and are accurate? Okay, so that's my introduction. Please let me know if there are any questions, and if not, I'll get to the technical material. What I'd like to cover is some background on dynamical systems, new techniques in the area, and how they give rise to efficient algorithms and to neural architectures that have some provable guarantees for next token prediction. And in particular, we use them for large language models, for language. So maybe this is familiar to the crowd that I'm talking in. I guess I'm talking to a dynamical systems crowd, right? To a control crowd, mostly. Is this true? Yeah. So these equations maybe you are familiar with. A dynamical system is described by these two equations. We have a state, maybe it's very high dimensional, and it's being modified by a dynamics function, F. There's some input U, there is noise W, and then we have the observation. This state usually is hidden. So if you think of the brain, the state are all activations and weights on the different neurons, and that's not something we can see. But what we can see is the observation, highly nonlinear function applied to the state that takes the state of the brain and gives you the tokens, the words that we're continuously spitting out. So you can imagine a brain that has an input time series tokens and output time series tokens, just like my talk right now in front of you guys. You ask me questions, I output, or maybe you just told me, please give a talk, and I'm giving the talk, which is the output time series. That's how I view the natural or the artificial brain as a dynamical system. So recap, state is this very high dimensional vector. I don't know what it is. It has all these different weights and neurons and so on, and synapses, but the observations are the tokens. They are very visible. If we are talking about language, then usually we have an autoregressive generative model. We don't actually have an input. We just have the inputs and the outputs are basically the same, the tokens. And I can get rid of the extra input and think of my input series and output series as the same. Now, the model of learning that I'm going to advocate for, it's basically what's being used to train the LLM. It says you want to predict the next token very accurately. So you see many observations, and then you predict the token, and you get a loss. It can be either mean square error, in the case of the low-end system over here. So maybe you predict, and get to see the actual observation of these beautiful shape. And your goal is to create predictions, not a model, predictions, very, very important, that are accurate in the mean square error and the perplexity sense, and suffer loss that goes to, that is small. So this is kind of an online learning model. You can, how do you measure performance here? I will stick to number one here. So if maybe we want the average loss to go to 0 if we have no noise at all, or to the noise variance if we have noise. Okay, so that's kind of a reasonable goal. There are other goals that, coming from regret, minimization literature, maybe you want to compete with some kind of predictor class. Okay, so far? So that's the formal model. That's how I'm going to formalize the problem of predicting the next token. I have seen the history of observations or inputs, predict a token y hat or y, and I suffer the loss y minus y true squared. Yeah. Okay, so now the question is, how can I learn nonlinear dynamical system? I promised you some method, maybe in the title and in the abstract. And how can I actually do it? Pardon me 1 second, I'm just going to close the door. There's some noise coming from outside. Okay, pardon me. Any questions so far?
No questions yet.
Okay. So okay, let me show you how, let me give you an efficient algorithm for doing exactly this, and which will apply to any nonlinear dynamical system from a very broad class of nonlinear dynamical systems. And the first step, this is a classical control paradigm, is called Koopman linearization. And the idea is predicting a nonlinear dynamical system can be very hard, but maybe we can simplify it by converting it to a linear system. And there is a vast literature on the subject. You can take your nonlinear dynamical system, create a linear, this is a linear system over here. So instead of x, I have x hat, and instead of the dynamics, I have a, and instead of the observation function g, I have a projection matrix c. And this can almost always be done. So under very mild conditions on the dynamical system, namely it's Lipschitz, the states are bounded, the observations are bounded, all of these are completely natural. There is some observability condition. So under that, I can always do it. It works extremely generally. What I like to do is I don't go to the infinite domain because you have all these compactness conditions that are harder to reason about. So I like to take an epsilon net and discretize and get an MDP. It's the same idea. This exists in the Koopman literature under the name of a Perron-Frobenius operator, but it's a very easy. This appears in the paper that I referenced in the abstract in a very simple proof. Just discretize and look at the MDP. So it's a very simple argument, but it allows us to build a linear system. Now, of course, when you build a linear system, I took an epsilon net. This can be huge, very high dimensional, especially if I'm talking about language. Already my word embedding lies in huge dimensional space. I get even bigger. I get exponential in that. And that's an issue. The other issue is that maybe the linear system I construct has complex eigenvalues. It can be marginally stable. It can have all sorts of issues with it that makes it hard to learn. I will defer that to later, but at least I moved from nonlinear to linear. Good. Yeah, so it can be high dimensional, it can be marginally stable, and the literature in control theory is filled with papers that try to learn the mapping by deep neural networks or by other methods, and then learn the linear dynamics. This is called EDMD, DMD or EDMD, dynamic mode learning of some form. So the idea is you can try to learn the linear map by deep learning, then you can try to learn the A here, and once you have that, you're in good shape. You have the dynamics. You can, of course, make a prediction. I'm not going to do that at all, okay? I'm not going to learn the lifting or the dynamics, and I'm not going to, and the reason is because of this inherent issues that it's very high dimensional and very conditioned. So I want to move to a different technique. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take. So this is a key thing. This is where our results differ from the literature, the main way. Okay,
Just a quick question.
please.
Like when when we consider different languages, like is there any uh, overlap or like some sort of reusability when it comes to these sort of matrices? Whatnot?
Yeah. Well, in practice, of course. In my theory, I don't mind that at all. Okay, this is completely oblivious to that. So in the theoretical description, I have a sequence of token y and I'm trying to predict the next y. And it can be the Lorentz system parameters, such as here, that convert to the Lorentz attractor, or it can be a sequence of words. So if there is a distribution shift, in some sense, it's not modeled exactly by what I said because its dynamics maybe changes, right? But if you're talking about the human brain, I can speak English, I can speak Hebrew, I can speak German, and it's the same dynamical system. It's the same person, Elad, talking to you. So it's captured by the same equations. I'm not going to make this distinction. So because the theory captures it, you might want to think of extensions, distribution shifts, and so on. I found this particular thing to be more elegant of treating just a single dynamical system. Okay. Any other questions?
So since epsilon, I can just paste the question on your chat, so it's probably easier to.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Epsilon, I'm going to read it out. Since epsilon net requires exponentially many states as the dimension grows, how does the curse of dimensionality affect the practicality of this approach in high-dimensional systems? That's a very good question. And the answer is previous approaches, it basically renders them very ineffective. But the method, I didn't describe my method yet at all, right? I didn't describe it. It will not, it's not going to depend on the dimension. So it's not going to affect it. Okay. So that's kind of a reason why I'm talking about the new method. All right. So linearization, step one, easy peasy. This is a well-known material, Koopman operator. And I'm now going to talk about what do we do? How do we resolve these issues of the high dimensionality and marginal stability of A? I'm going to start with the marginal stability of A. And here again, I'm going to go back to the theory of control of dynamical systems and a beautiful result by Leuvenberger from Stanford. And he talked about taking a linear dynamical system and modifying it by a technique called the observer system. It's called the Leuvenberg observer system. The theory is very general. It says you can take your dynamical system here. This is what I got from the linearization. It's high dimensional, it's horrible. But here's one thing I can do. I can, by putting the past outputs back into the system, I can reimagine the system. Reimagine meaning I'm now sitting in Princeton and I can kind of, metaphorically imagine I'm in a different place. And that means, so I added the previous inputs by some transformation L, that changes my dynamics, but the observations are almost the same. They converge extremely rapidly to the original system under some very mild conditions. You guys are nodding. I'm assuming you have seen this before. This is great. So this is the theory. It's not my theory. It's the theory of pole placement and the Leuvenberg observer system and Ackermann's formula that says basically by picking this L carefully here, this L that my cursor is now hanging over, I can move the eigenpoles of the system to be whatever I want, which is really nice. I didn't know that this exists until I stumbled upon the literature. Now, of course, there is a price to pay. If I move all the poles to 1/2, which makes it a strongly stable system, then the condition number of the new system here is going to be pretty big. But Still, this thing is at least possible. So I can move all the eigenpoles from whatever marginally stable disaster I had in the linearization to something better. And in particular, what I care about is for the eigenspectrum to be real or marginally stable, one of the two. So recap, I have the brain and I think of it as a dynamical system. It's a nonlinear dynamical system. That's kind of the pictures I show you how I think about it. I can convert it to linear, very high dimensional linear by Koopman operator, and I can convert it to real valued LDS by the Leuvenberg observer system. So far, tools, very nice tools, standard tools from control theory, and I am now in the domain of a very high dimensional, real valued linear dynamical system. It may sound as if I didn't do anything. I mean, how do I learn that? That's kind of what I want to get to next. But you will see that this reduction is very powerful, because to learn real value dynamical systems, I have a great algorithm that I can use. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay. So how do I learn a real valued linear dynamical system? The real valued, by that I mean that the eigenvalues are real. That's what I mean. That's all I need. I can do a bit more general, but I'm not going to go into the kind of precise technical details. Well, here's a linear dynamical system. It's similar to what I had before, but the equations are now linear. As I said, it's basically without loss of generality. If I don't care about the dimensions, without loss of generality, that I can Koopman lift my brain to be linear. I have a hidden high dimensional state, I have an input, I have an output with noises and so on. The equations are manipulated linearly. And I'm in the same domain that I want to learn to predict the output of this linear dynamical system very well. How can I do that? Well, linear is nice because I can write the output of the dynamical system explicitly in terms of the inputs. And this is, if I recurse over the equations of the linear dynamics, I have the linear transition matrix A appearing in higher and higher polynomial powers as we move back into the past more and more. How can I predict this value? That's my question now. And this is a much better, well-studied problem than I started off with, because now I'm in the linear domain. Well, vast literature, there are books on system identification, trying to identify these matrices A, B, C. It's a non-convex problem. Gradient descent sometimes works. There is a citation here of Hart et al., where they show that under some conditions it works. But this literature of system identification is not going to be useful for me. And the reason is that this A lies in extremely high dimension. It's extremely high dimensional matrix. I don't want to recover it, okay? That's going to be a disaster. And then there are other techniques. For example, you can try to do direct parameterization. You can do convex relaxation. Forget about the structure of these inputs and directly learn a mapping, in this case a linear map, from past to future by convex relaxation. The hope is that if the eigenvalues of this matrix A are strictly smaller than 1, so the system is stable, then the effects of going back into the past are going to decay exponentially as you move back and back and back into the past. So this means that, for example, if you have a stable matrix A, you need a few terms to kind of capture the entire map. Good. That's not going to be useful either for my purposes, because language is not low memory. I need to look at the entire, maybe you said something in the very beginning and you mentioned what the seminar is about and the video is recorded or not, whatever, all these things, they are now 20 minutes into the past. I can't, thousands of tokens have passed. I cannot learn a mapping with so many tokens past to future. Okay, that's also not very useful. But it was a long-standing open question in control theory. Can we learn marginally stable? Marginally stable means long memory. Linear dynamical systems efficiently and without the hidden dimension. The nice thing here is there is no hidden dimension, just input to output. So I want all of these properties to hold. I want marginally stable, no hidden dimension, very efficient. And if we zoom out for a minute, why do I want that? Because I reduced nonlinear to this question, right? So it will give me a very broad applicable method. Cool. So here is a theorem from 2017 that we worked on with my students Karan Singh and Cyril Zhang, which says, this was a new characterization. It says, there is a characterization of a linear dynamical system for symmetric, a very special subcase of matrices. So that's why I moved to the real value, if you remember. So real eigenvalues. If we have real eigenvalues, and then we have a very nice characterization. There is a spectral characterization of the system that parameterized by k, and the output of the linear dynamical system is very close to this characterization, up to e to the minus k, extremely close, exponentially good. It doesn't depend on the hidden dimension, it doesn't depend on the marginal stability, and it depends only logarithmically on the sequence length. So if you believe that your system is symmetric or real valued, real eigenvalues, then you do have this beautiful characterization, which is much more efficient than previous techniques. If there are questions, I'm happy to take. If not, I'll move on to explain why. What is this characterization? How is it built? And how can I use it to build the LLM? That's what I'm going to do next.
Okay. There is one question.
Yeah.
So, I think it's more about the consideration of the noise.
This theorem can be extended to be noise robust in the sense that we can have even adversarial perturbations coming in. And at that point, I'm able to compete with the best linear dynamical predictor in hindsight. So there is a regret formulation that allows me to do that. I won't be able to get into the details of that, but I'll be able to give you a reference at the end of my talk for a textbook that has much more details than what I'll be able to give here. But yeah, inherently the online learning setting of trying to predict the next token and compete with the best in hindsight, that's inherently robust, very robust methodology that eschews statistical assumptions by game theoretic regret, which is an adversarial notion, and therefore you can tolerate even adversarial perturbations. So it's actually inherently robust to noise. Let me give the intuition for spectral filtering, then I'll try to tell you how we build the system. So the intuition, I'm going to go over it quickly because of time constraints. If I have a scalar system, this is the way the past affects the future. And I can write it by the impulse response vector, 1a, a squared, and so on, multiplied by the past inputs. So impulse response vector times past inputs. These impulse response vectors, they live in R to the L. L is context length, if you recall. And, oh, I see a question here. The question is about Gaussian noise. Let's assume no noise for now. How about I take the noise questions later, if you're fine with that. So impulse response vectors live in R to the L, and in fact, they span all of R to the L. But the intuition is that actually they span a much lower subspace approximately. It's a linear algebra characterization of linear dynamical systems. And here is the theorem. There exist phi 1 to phi k in R to the L. These are L-dimensional vectors, but they span all impulse response vectors exponentially well, up to e to the minus k. That's kind of the main claim. What are these vectors? These vectors happen to be the eigenvectors of the matrix, which is the integral over all impulse response vectors times their transpose. Let me write it down more precisely. This is the matrix Z. It's the integral from 0 to 1 of all these impulse response vectors. It's a PSD Hankel matrix. You can compute the integral. It's a fixed. It's not data dependent. This is not data. I know your seminar is called data dependent seminar. This is not data dependent. This is math, pure math matrix. It's called the Hilbert matrix. The Hilbert matrix has a very interesting phenomena called eigendecay. The eigenvalues of it decay exponentially fast. And therefore, the impulse response vectors have all but epsilon of the mass concentrated on the top log L over epsilon eigenvectors. That's what I'm going to use. So these linear dynamical systems, they live linear algebraically in a low subspace. And I know the space. The space is the eigenvectors of this Hilbert matrix. And just using simple linear algebra, I can take my linear dynamical prediction and convert it to this additional basis, to this alternate basis, spectral basis, by a fixed featurization of the eigenvectors, and learn only the projection parameters, which are very few, and they decay exponentially fast. If you followed me, great. If not, I'll give you more references and details and so on. But bottom line, I have this filtering interpretation, so I can write a linear dynamical system as a linear function of not the past few inputs, but the past few filtered in all of the inputs, but filtered. That's where the long memory comes in. So I have all the past inputs, I filter them, and then I project. And the filters look like this. They're very beautiful pictorially. And this gives rise to a machine which can learn these projections. You know, what happens when we go to high dimensions? Well, these are real values. We can just sum up all the coefficients. If these are complex numbers, we run into a lot of trouble because you have phases and you kind of go around. And we had a lot of work trying to get over it. But what I told in the beginning of this talk is a much simpler solution, which is basically to go via the Löwenberger observer system and imagine that we have real eigenvalues. And then this whole theory basically applies. Okay, where am I? We started with brain. I will move to nonlinear dynamics, linearized to high dimensions, real valued by the Löwenberg system. And now I told you how to learn real valued linear dynamical systems by spectral filtering. So the picture is kind of complete. I mean, I start from the brain and I tell you how to learn it. How do I learn it? I can take my input signal. I have these fixed filters. It gives me featurization. I learn the projection parameters, and I can predict. We call the spectral transform unit, and the theoretical guarantee of it is that if the data came from a linear dynamical system, now we have a much better theoretical guarantee because it's in some sense even nonlinear. And then this STU represents it extremely well, and I should be able to get a very good approximation of the original signal if I fit these parameters. There's a very few parameters, maybe 30 parameters, very well. Happy to take questions now before I move on to the neural architecture.
There are no questions yet. I guess it's the only question was about the Gaussian noise, which...
Gaussian noise, yeah. Do we assume the noise to be Gaussian? No, I don't assume that actually. I mean, the noise can be arbitrary, it just has to be bounded. As long as it's bounded, I can show a theoretical guarantee of a competitive theoretical guarantee. I can find the best prediction compared to the best linear dynamical system. And this guarantee here is dimension independent. This is crucial to say. So there is no dimension coming into here at all. There's input dimension by output dimension, that's it. There's no hidden dimension. There is no marginal stability. So because of that, I could have taken, this can be a very high dimensional linear dynamical system, and in fact can be the linearized Koopman system. So I could take a nonlinear system, Koopmanize it, and then apply this method. Good. So I'll move on to explain the neural architecture and experiments. This is a simple synthetic experiment where I learn a linear dynamical system and compare it to other architectures suggested in the literature. For example, LRU by Orvieto et al. This is a neural net. And our method here, which is very simple, convex methodology, learns it much better. You would expect that. Theory says this is the way, it's linear dynamics, of course I learn it well. We can compare again on a very simple synthetic signal to Mamba, it's a type of an RNN, and to attention, and to attention meaning transformer. And of course we win big time because this is a linear dynamical system. But as I said, the theory applies to nonlinear systems by this Koopman lifting. So you can take a Lorentz system, partially observed Lorentz system, and try to predict the next item in the trajectory, right? So the red line is our method, spectral filtering, applied to some kind of lifting, but learned lifting. So we did apply here. At this point, there is no more theory. I'm now using the insights gained from theory to build a neural architecture. So we do some kind of neural lifting and then learn by spectral filtering the output. It's much better than DMD and kind of other DMDs all the way here, LDS, DMD. So it's much better than these other techniques. The beautiful thing is if you let it run, by next token prediction itself, if you let the system run from here or something, you will see this beautiful orange line and go crossing over to the other side and so on. So it did pick up the dynamics just from next token prediction, which is a beautiful thing. You can try to predict at a double pendulum and you will get great results as well. And you can try to build a neural architecture from this insight. So the neural architecture says, take your input, lift it, nonlinear lifting. Apply the spectral filtering, project, then apply nonlinearity on the way out. You can stack this up in layer. You can interleave sliding window attention. We call that Flash STU. That's kind of a new architecture that we developed here in Princeton. And then you can test it on next token prediction from language. So this is a 2.6 billion model, and we compare it to a transformer. Train perplexity is about 5% better, which is very nice. And we compare it to other state-based models, Mamba and Mamba 2 hybrid and other kind of models. Still get kind of a win. Win is smaller, but still does pretty well. What people care about in language is not really only perplexity. They care about eval. This is called evals, sampling evals. So you train it, the language model. You want to see emerging behavior. You want to see, wait a minute, can it now solve a math problem? This is called evals, and the evals are also promising. So this is a small model. It's a 500 million model. It doesn't do great. None of them do great, but at least it's competitive with the other transformer architecture. We applied it to robotics prediction. Here you can take a Walker 2D. You can train it with PPO or whatever algorithm you have, and that will give you a walking robot. And the task here is to predict the walking robot's movements from observation. And again, the STU models do extremely well in terms of loss minimization, much better than Transformer or Mamba. And then I have advanced topics, but I think I'm not going to go into the advanced topics. I think what I'll do now, because of the time constraint that you guys have, I can take questions and then summarize. Is that okay, folks?
You could take more time to go to the advanced topics. Like it's totally fine.
I'll just mention. So I mean, we have methods because the model is convolutional. It's based on filtering the inputs, right? That's what we're doing. We take the input, we have a filter that came from the math, from the Hilbert matrix, and we convolve it. Convolutions in the time domain are products in the frequency domain, which means you can use the FFT algorithm, fast Fourier transform. And instead of computing many convolutions, you can do many of them at once somehow by the FFT. And that gives rise to fast inference, fast generation, fast training by an algorithm we call future fill. And that's all I want to say. So there is a huge improvement in running time compared to other methods. And at this point, I will conclude. So I talked about sequence-to-sequence prediction using fixed filters that come from the theory. I believe they give insight into the dimension of linear dynamical system and of language because of this eigendecay. The eigendecay means you can compress things and you can learn a representation based on few filters. And I've gone through how you can provably learn marginally stable symmetric linear dynamical systems. I've went through why this actually can be extended to all linear dynamical systems by the Löwenberg observer system, and basically then bounded and Lipschitz nonlinear dynamics by Koopman operator. The interesting thing about these reductions is that they do not depend on the hidden dimension or on the marginal stability, and therefore they are robust to nonlinearities. This gives rise to a deep neural network architecture that has good running time, performance. I didn't go over length generalization. That's another interesting topic. Hopefully next time. And I did mention there is a book coming up by myself and my former student Karan Singh. He's now a professor at CMU, and this is on archive. You can download it, and it has more details on various aspects of what I discussed. And at this point, I'd like to thank you and leave time for questions.
Yeah, I've pasted a question on the chat. Like,
Should I read the question? Let me read the question.
I can read it. So,
Okay.
when applying Koopman operator-based linearization to real-world systems, how do you quantify or validate the accuracy of the resulting linear approximation?
Good, very good. Okay, the point is, so let me go back in the slides. So there is an important point here. So previous approaches, they try to learn the Koopman map, and therefore they have to do what you're just asking me now. The audience member who just asked me, that's exactly what you have to do. You learn a map from the nonlinear state to a high dimensional linear state, and you want to validate, is it meaningful? Does it really go through the linear dynamics and so on? The point of my techniques is that I don't need to do that. I don't learn a mapping at all, no mapping at all. All I do, the algorithm takes the past inputs, spectral filters them, and projects back. That's all it does. It's a direct input-output map, and therefore it does not have to learn. I don't need to verify anything. I just need to know that it exists. It exists under very general conditions, and that the Löwenberg observer system exists, and that also exists under very general conditions. And then I'm guaranteed by spectral filtering to be able to learn successfully the map from past to future, if that makes sense. So that's kind of a difference from previous work to what I'm presenting here.
There is one more question, which is about sample complexity.
Oh, I cannot hear you. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah. So the next question is about sample complexity. So the exact question is, what's the sample complexity difference between learning with and without spectral filtering?
Okay, good. This is a very good question. I mean, there is a sample complexity in theory and in practice. In practice, I guess I showed you some experiments that show you it performs better, right? I mean, if the loss drops sooner, it means that it's doing better in terms of applied. In theory, I don't think that there is any sample complexity bounds for previous work, as far as I know. I don't know that nonlinear dynamical systems are provably learnable. I don't know that. I mean, maybe you guys know better than me, but I just don't know such results. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you it's something. I just don't know. I don't think it exists. So I'm giving some kind of sample complexity bound. In fact, let me see. So I can share with you. Okay, this is a relevant paper. Can you see what the paper here?
Yep.
So it's on archive. It's a relatively new paper, and it has regret bounds, which are equivalent to sample complexity bounds. So here is an example theorem. It says you have observations, and here is the algorithm, spectral filtering, like I just described to you, and it has this kind of regret bound here. So the sum of errors is bounded by some term here that behaves sublinearly with the horizon. This gives you a sample complexity bound because it says if it immediately translates to some kind of you take the average regret, it tells you how this average error decays. Now, what are the constants here? They're a bunch of logarithms. They're not really important. This is a bound on the magnitude of the states. The most important parameter here is this Q star. Q star is the value of the Löwenberger program, condition number of the Löwenberger program. I am kind of, it's a, how should I describe it? When you take your eigenpoles and you convert them to being real valued or stable, the condition number of the new system comes into the sample complexity. If you started from a symmetric system, that's going to be 1. That's fine. You don't need to do anything. If you started with a complicated eigenpoles, you have to pay more in the Löwenberger program. And that dominates the sample complexity. As far as I know, this is a new parameter. It's an interesting parameter. In certain cases, we know to prove it's tight. But as long as it's finite, this thing is always has converges to 0, always. Yeah, this is a great question, and I think it's far from being solved. So this is just some initial bound we have. I don't know that there is any previous bound. As far as I know, there isn't. So this is the bound I'm aware of that has a sample complexity for nonlinear dynamical systems, and it's based on this Löwenberger program, which is a very interesting theory from control of dynamical systems.
Okay, there is one more question, which is pasted it just to read it loud. Can this neural network framework be used for real-time prediction for real-time control?
Okay, I honestly don't know. I didn't try that. I don't know. You're welcome to try it out. I think there are so many interesting questions here. I don't know enough about the real-time control to answer you. So my apologies for that.
Uh, Thank you so much, and I guess that's all the questions we have for today.
Very good. Well, thank you for hosting me, folks.
And
Pleasure.
yeah, it was a pleasure having you, Dr. Hazan.
Thank you. Thank you for me as well. All the best to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye bye.
All right, everyone. See you next week on a new talk.